Hello everybody and welcome to my YouTube channel. I of course am just another Heavy Metal Maniac, and today I am doing a response video. This is going to be a response video to Altars of Madness. Really great channel. I've done a previous response to him before. If you're not subbed to his channel, go subscribe. I'll leave a link to his channel down in the description. Really cool dude, really great channel. But anyways, he uploaded a video discussing 5 albums he likes from genres he typically doesn't like. And I thought this was like a pretty cool idea, so I wanted to hop on this thread. This was a kind of difficult for me to put together because usually for me, even with genres I'm not as big on, I can always find at least a few bands that I like. But so yeah, I really kind of had to think, okay, what genres of music do I really not care for much at all? So yeah, I've gathered 5 albums here from genres I typically don't like, one metal subgenre and 4 non-metal genres. So yeah, but for further ado, enough of my ramblings, let's just get right into the rankings. We'll start off with the only like metal album on my list. So I obviously love heavy metal, that's why I created this entire channel, and I love most of metal subgenres, but for me, one subgenre I always struggle to to listen to, and so one subgenre that I've never been really a fan of is grindcore. I've given grindcore multiple chances. I've listened to a bunch of different big names from the genre, like Napalm Death, Rotten Sound, Nasum, Terrorizer, all these bands, but it's just does not click with me. I understand why people like it, but it just definitely is not my style of metal. But there are exceptions to every rule, and this is actually a fairly new one for me. So the album that I've chosen is Nails with their debut album Unsilent Death. So one night I was just listening to some heavy, fast, intense music. Like I listened to some Archgoat, and then I listened to some Mortician, and I was like, you know what, I'm in the mood for more just heavy, intense shit, and Nails had just put out their brand new album Every Bridge Burning, so I figured, why not give that album a listen, see if I like it? You know, it's always good to try to expand your musical horizons, I think. And to my surprise, I really dug that album. Like, I thought that album was really good, honestly, and I really liked it. So I also went back and I listened to their debut album, Unsilent Death. And yeah, I think I prefer Unsilent Death to the new album. But yeah, they're both just really killer in my opinion. Yeah, so yeah, it's just absolutely vicious, heavy, grindcore. But to me, whereas a problem I often find with grindcore is that a lot of songs kind of just run together and nothing really stands out, I feel like Nails is good at writing songs that are, again, it's grindcore again, it's very blast beaty, it's very fast, it's just very intense, at 11 the whole time, but I feel like they're good at kind of writing songs that stand out from one another, and songs that have actual memorable riffs and memorable sections, and they combine different elements, they have hints of death metal and hints of even thrash at certain spots in some of these songs. So yeah, I think that really kind of gives these songs a unique edge. And so Unsilent Death is my favorite Nails album for now, only because I kind of still need to dive into the rest of their catalog. But yeah, who knows, maybe this is what finally will open the grindcore floodgates for me. Maybe this is finally the album that clicks with me and all the other grind bands will click with me. But for now, this is kind of the only grindcore album. I like other bands that mix elements of grindcore, like Soylent Green, but they're I wouldn't call Soylent Green a pure grindcore band. They're definitely more sludge death grind, sludge death metal grindcore hybrid. So yeah, Nails is kind of the only pure grind band, I guess you could say, that I'm currently a fan of, but who knows, things might open up in the future. So that's my first choice, Nails with their debut album Unsilent Death. Alright, so the second album on my list is, well, it's a punk album. I've said it before on this channel a few times, I'll say it again, I am not the world's biggest punk fan. I respect punk for kind of the culture and the movement of it, and I respect punk a lot for how influential some of it was to metal, especially to thrash metal and stuff. But for me, punk is just not a genre I've ever been really big into. I find a lot of it to be just kind of overly simplistic, which I guess that's kind of the point. The whole point of punk really is just to hammer out 3 chords and scream about how you hate the establishment, and that's fine. That's, nothing wrong with that style. It's just really not for me. But there are a couple punk bands that I do like, and my favorite punk band is Social Distortion, and my favorite album by them is their self-titled album, which came out in, was it 1990 if I remember correctly? I love this album. And like I said, Social Distortion, this is my favorite punk band. I really love this band because, yeah, they're a punk band, so they have, you know, all the punk riffs and all the kind of punky drum beats and stuff, but they also mix elements of like blues and country, and I feel like they just do it really, really well. Like Mike Ness, I feel like he's kind of unique for a punk vocalist. Like he's not your typical like shouty, you know, punk vocalist. He's got this much more kind of bluesy, country-ish kind of crooning thing he does with his vocals. I think is just really, really cool. And yeah, this self-titled album, to me, it's definitely their best album, even though I pretty much love everything this band's ever done. This self-titled album is just fucking amazing. Again, you got this is like kind of the album where they really kind of came to their own, because the two albums that came before this are just kind of more straight up hardcore punk albums. You don't get as much of the kind of blues country influence, but on this album you get a lot of that blues country influence. Obviously you have the amazing cover of Ring of Fire, originally done by Johnny Cash, which I love the cover. That song, I just love the shit out of their version of Ring of Fire. I just think it's so awesome. And you have other amazing songs in here, like Ball and Chain is awesome. She's a Knockout. Story of My Life is a really fun song. What else? Drug Train is a really cool song. Yeah, I just really, really love this album. This is definitely my favorite punk album. I do like a few other punk bands, like namely the Misfits. I've actually worn a Misfits t-shirt in a couple of my videos. Because I do enjoy the Misfits for, you know, being kind of just fun horror punk, and I think they're pretty good. But my favorite punk band is Social Distortion, and my favorite punk album, I should say this is my favorite punk album of all time, because it definitely is. Yeah, Social Distortion, the self-titled album, I just think it's fucking awesome. All right, so now we're going to kind of get away from like the rock music realm entirely. The next genre I've chosen is pop music. So I'm not the biggest fan of pop music, especially a lot of modern pop. I don't get into a lot of modern pop. I find a lot of modern pop is just not for me at all. I don't think it's like bad necessarily. It's just, I've just kind of accepted that most of it is not for me. So I've chosen an album from the golden age of pop, in my opinion, which was obviously the 1980s. And I've gone with The Cars and their album Heartbeat City. Now, I guess you could kind of technically consider The Cars to be a pop rock band, but with this album, it's like 85% pop. Like there's only guitars on, there's no guitars on most of these songs, even though they appear on a couple songs. But regardless, I think this definitely counts as like a pop album rather than a rock album of any kind. Pop, new wave, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I love this album, and I enjoy it like pretty much all the Cars albums. Like I think the Cars are just a really, really amazing pop band, but Heartbeat City for me is my favorite album by them. I just love this album. Like this has everything I want out of like an 80s pop album. You got the fun, you know, more upbeat type songs about love and romance, but then you also have these kind of very dark, very moody songs like Drive, which is just, Drive is a masterpiece, and that's just such a beautiful song. I love, like, you know, Magic is one of my favorite songs off of here. You Might Think. I just love this album. Yeah, this is possibly my favorite pop album of all time, which you know, there's still, I don't know, like, there could be a few other bands I listen to that you could probably consider to be pop bands that I might like more, but for now, this is my Heartbeat City by The Cars is my favorite pop album. Yeah, not much else to say. I just absolutely adore this album, and yeah, it's not a genre I frequent, but I fucking love this album. All right, now the last two albums on my list are actually soundtracks to movies, so they're, but I think they still count for, you know, all intents and purposes. So the first soundtrack is I'm not 100% sure what to qualify it like genre-wise, but it's the Fight Club soundtrack. Fight Club is one of my favorite movies of all time. I know that movie kind of has like a bit of a bad reputation nowadays because, I don't know, I feel like the cinema bros have kind of like taken that movie and ran with it, which obviously is fucking annoying. But regardless, I love that movie. I love everything about it. Like I love, you know, its humor and it's also its dark, twisted psychology and the plot twist and everything. I love that album, or that movie, I should say. But I also really, really enjoy the soundtrack to this album. Again, I'm not 100% sure what you would classify it as. Like, it's kind of techno, kind of hip-hop, or I guess maybe trip-hop would be a more appropriate term. It's got some kind of, like, industrial elements. Obviously, this was made by the Dust Brothers, later known as the Chemical Brothers. Yeah, I don't know. I just really like this album. Like, it perfectly fits. Like, I honestly, like, with a lot of soundtracks, it's like, yeah, the soundtrack might be nice, but would you really listen to it without like the accompanying film to go along with it? For most soundtracks, the answer is definitely no. But for this, I would happily put this album on just at any time. Like I just like kind of the dirty, gritty, real kind of underground like vibe of this album. Like it feels like you're in, the setting of Fight Club when you listen to this album. Like it perfectly just captures the grimy, dirty feeling of that movie, and I just really, really like it. Yeah, obviously it's all instrumentals aside from the last track, which is, Tyler Durden or Brad Pitt as Tyler Durden doing a voiceover. Yeah, and I'm not much else to say. It's just an amazing soundtrack, and yep, again, not sure what you'd call it. I guess techno, trip hop, industrial, whatever you want to call it. It's awesome. All right, and the final album on my list is also a soundtrack, and this honestly might be my favorite film soundtrack ever. This was done by, or composed by, the one and only Peter Gabriel, who of course you all know from Genesis and also his very successful solo career. And I'm not 100% sure what you would classify this soundtrack as either. I guess like world music or like new age music is kind of the term they use for it. But regardless, my favorite soundtrack of all time is Passion, which was the soundtrack for Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ. Last Temptation of Christ is one of my favorite movies of all time. I just adore that movie. I think that movie is honestly an overlooked masterpiece in Scorsese's catalog. And the soundtrack is part of a big reason why I love that movie. But this soundtrack is beautiful. Like, it's just haunting, and so, again, it's just such a beautiful, beautiful soundtrack. And again, it's like one of those soundtracks where I feel like I can listen to it without the accompanying film and just listen to it as on its own as an album. Like, it mixes so many different elements of like kind of these like, Middle Eastern like type melodies and like kind of traditional like instruments that would have been in, the time period or the setting, but it also kind of, they got like these haunting chants that are just absolutely, again, they just really stick with me. But also it's like kind of like poppy at the same time. Like they kind of feel like they took like these kind of more world music-y kind of traditional type instruments and like chants and stuff and kind of really melded them into these kind of more poppy type songs. And they're catchy, they're super memorable, and they're just, again, absolutely beautiful. There's like kind of like keyboards on here too and stuff, I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure like what every instrument that was used on this album is, but regardless, I just love the soundtrack. And so, yeah, go watch the movie if you haven't, because I think that movie is just, again, very, very underrated movie. And this soundtrack is absolutely beautiful. Of course, done by the one and only Peter Gabriel. So yeah, it's just amazing. And well, that concludes my response video to Altars of Madness. Once again, go subscribe to his channel if you're not. He's a really, really cool dude. And yeah, well, not much else to say. I guess that about does it. I'm just another Heavy Metal Maniac. I'll see you all sometime in the future. In the meantime, all of you take care and have a fantastic day. So long.